I'd like to welcome everyone to Trail Talk Tuesday, Episode 4, Funding Trails, presented by Kansas Trails, Inc. I'm your host, Brittany Holm, and I'm super excited about today's episode, where we're diving into one of the most important topics in trail development, how to fund your projects and make them happen. But before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone that our Executive Director, Mike Scanlon, is wrapping up the Ride for Resilience, his 700-mile journey throughout the state, where he's visiting over 60 trails to raise funding for Go To Lung Cancer and for Kansas Trails, Inc. Mike is on the home stretch and would love your encouragement. He's currently raised $44,489 of his $75,000 goal and has a few more days left on the trail. You can watch Mike's progress on our website, kstrails.org, and through our social media platforms. This is such a great initiative that Mike's doing, and we're super proud of him. All right, let's get started on today's episode. We're joined by 4 experts who work every day to advance trail funding across Kansas. You'll hear from Jenny Kramer with Kansas Department of Transportation. She's going to cover some upcoming grant programs and some strategies for strong applications. We'll also be joined by Mike Goodwin with Kansas Trails, Inc., who's stepping in for Cherie Riffey from the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. And he's going to outline the Recreational Trails Program and how it supports trail building statewide. Trisha Purdon will join us. She's with the Kansas Department of Commerce and the Office of Rural Prosperity, and she's going to highlight creative state funding and rural prosperity initiatives. And last but certainly not least, we'll have the amazing Kelli Mark with the Sunflower Foundation, sharing new opportunities through the Sunflower Trails program. Together, they'll guide us through the resources, partnerships, and strategies that help turn trail visions into reality. So I'd like to now turn it over to Jenny Kramer.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm the only one who heard that. And so a pretty good amount of money, like never enough. But the nice thing about projects that are focused on walking and biking is they're a lot cheaper than a highway project, right? So like with roads, the roads are very expensive because they have to be able to hold large, very heavy automobiles and trucks and such. So typically we get a lot more bang for our buck with the like sidewalks, side paths, multi-use paths, trails, bike lanes. Now we will do road diets or lane reconfigurations to make a road more multimodal, so to better accommodate walking and biking safely. But it's also it's safer for motor vehicles too. So like to see those projects where everybody is kind of winning, I guess, and helping people to realize that when we talk about safety, often what is safer for people walking and biking is also safer for people driving, because currently, as you know, we have a lot of crashes, a lot of fatalities on our roads every year, every day. All right, so the upcoming TA opportunity, our call for projects will be released on February 2nd. And so we do start with a pre-application concept paper that allows communities who are maybe on the fence, they're not totally sure what they're going to be working on to submit some kind of concept paper that we could provide feedback, but then also just generally being able to provide feedback on these concepts, so to help communities make an application for the strongest application possible. I just have a couple of other grants listed here, and I think they're all represented today. So I'm not going to say anything about it, but just keep an eye out for that Recreation Trail Program. That's also from FHWA. It's also Transportation Alternatives. It's just a different sub-allocation and name, and goes to the Wildlife and Parks. Got the Community Development Block Grant, a lot of overlap there, and I think it's available more often for funding. And we've got the cost share that's open fall and spring. So we just got to walk on a nice 10-foot side path in Osawatomie that will be connecting to a TA project. So they definitely are funding walking and biking projects. And then I do have a web page. If you have this PowerPoint, I need to update it. But that has a few more options on there. Next slide.
Let me just pop in here real quick too. All of the links will be available after the presentation, and I have a little 2-page PDF that has all of the highlights from each of the speakers' presentations. So all of the active links that our speakers will refer to will be available after the program's over. And then also one thing I also forgot to say is we'll do Q&A at the very end, so we'll have all 4 of the panelists available at the end for Q&A. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
Oh.
All right. So Brittany just wanted me to respond to a few questions that she thought would be most relevant for this trail talk. So the next one is how to make your grant application more competitive, or kind of what we look for as funders. So the main thing that we look for when we receive an application is a demonstration of understanding of the actual project, of the scope, that the cost estimates seem reasonable, and oftentimes we'll get cost estimates in there and they're like really low. They don't, it's like they probably don't really understand that they're going to have retaining walls and maybe kind of managing some flooding on the paths, or any number of things that come up in projects. So definitely getting out there, learning about what it means to be a federally funded project, going through the KDOT bidding process, doing all the field plans, working with a consultant engineer. Now, once the city does get funded, a consultant is hired and takes care of all the work, and ideally you would hire someone who understands these things. But initially, working with someone and demonstrating that in application that you understand what's involved, and it's not a quick process either. Cost share goes a lot faster, and I encourage cost share. And these other state funded and RTP functions like a state funded program too. So they're a lot faster. The TA, federal, state, everything, it takes a while, and it can be complicated. That's why the larger projects like this bridge that was just built on the Flint Hills Trail that we funded, those make more sense for TA typically. But we do get sidewalk projects, connections to trails, like in Topeka, they had a TA project where it was just 15 different connections from the sidewalk networks, neighborhoods, to the Shunga Trail, to the Landon Trail, to levees, and just making those trails more accessible. And that's a great project. It's just, Topeka's maybe a little bit larger. They can handle the match and such. So just working with that engineer, walking the project, biking the project, whatever you need to do to get an understanding of what's needed. And then demonstrating a safety benefit. And that can be pretty broad. So just even getting people off the road. So a trail is getting people off the road. And, I live in Topeka now, and that's, I take the Shunga to go to the hardware store, to, the grocery store. Whenever I can get off the road for transportation, to travel on my bike or walking, I do. So I value those trails for myself, mostly for transportation. A lot of other people's, it's recreation. It doesn't matter what you call it. The trails are great for recreation, but they are, if you can talk about the safety benefit as well for the TA grant, that'll make your project or your application more competitive. And then, especially if you can show that it's allowing kids to walk and bike to school more safely, those are very compelling, strong applications. Hard not to fund those. And then you'll want to base it off of a community plan, whether it's a trail plan, just a bike ped plan, a pedestrian plan. If you don't have a plan, we do have a nice little template or toolkit with it's just turnkey templates that you can kind of do a plug and play. Once you do the public involvement, get it done, have your public health people help, city, schools, volunteer, nonprofits, get something kind of published, approved, that you can show in your grant application. Especially this is especially helpful if there's ever a KDOT project on a highway and the community really wants a crossing there. So it's a, we have trails that cross highways, like the Flint Hills Trail. And if you have that in a plan and you find out KDOT's going to be improving that road, doing just a mill and overlay or something, you have a better argument to get some kind of crossing in there because it's in a community plan. KDOT takes that seriously. Next slide. All right, and then just best practices to follow, and this is specific to the transportation alternatives. We do allow nonprofits to apply. This is the first year we're doing that, or this round right now is the first round that we are doing that. It does seem like to be a little more challenging for nonprofits to go through our process. There's like a lot of agreement language. You still have to do an agreement with like the city or county and KDOT. So my advice for that would be to definitely partner with the city or county, and if possible, get them to be the applicant to write the application, because they're going to have to be on the agreement anyway. But in some cases, like we have a school district we're working with right now, and the city was just like, we don't have time, we don't want to deal with it, smaller, like you do it, we'll say yes to everything, that's fine. And that's fine too. Like if they've already talked to them and they just don't want to do the work, but they're willing to like sign off on the right of way and all of that stuff, that can work. But if you're a nonprofit and you want to build a trail and you have to have the city, county involved and on an agreement and have never talked to them about it, or they're just like kind of on the fence with their support, that's going to be an uphill battle. And it may not work out in that case. So definitely getting on board with them, seeing what they're willing to do in terms of even being the applicant and with you promising to do all the work, or definitely having them promise to sign off on everything they need to. And then if there's, like the railroad gets, I'll say in the way a lot. We love railroads, love trains, love to have more trains in the state. But they tend to be difficult to work with when you've got just any kind of basic crossing. And because there are so many, like that comes up a lot. And just recognizing that if you want to do a trail and it's crossing tracks, like it's going to take longer. It's going to be expensive. Like every time they go out there to review, assess, or anything, it's thousands of dollars. So just recognizing that, tens of thousands of dollars minimum usually. And then also they can be difficult to work with. I don't know why. Like it seems like they would want you to spend money on a safer crossing versus people just crossing willy-nilly. But that's just how it is. Some are easier to work with, but even the easiest ones to work with can be difficult. So if you can show you've already got some kind of relationship, you have a history, you've worked with them before, that's going to feel like less of a red flag when we see your project crossing a railroad without like showing that you understand the difficulty that's going to for sure create like in some manner. But then also like understanding right of way generally, like if you have a trail that's going through people's right of way, even for temporary easements for construction, that's gonna be a lot of work. So just understand that, and if you're like already like informing the property owners, getting that buy-in, getting that support is really important. And then mentioned this before, just working with an engineer when developing cost estimate. So like in Marysville, they've got a local consulting firm who's helping them think about the 3-block section like that they need to connect their trail there. So that's going to help with make their application stronger and like demonstrate that understanding that I had talked about. And just wanted to wrap up and encourage you all to, if you have not already, to register for our 2025 Walk, Bike, Roll Kansas Active Transportation Summit. It's coming up quick. It's 2 weeks from today, and I've been working on it for a while, obviously. And the last time we had it was in 2023 in McPherson. So maybe a couple of you attended that. Kelly's going to be on a panel with us, and so anyways, it's shaping up to be a great conference in Lawrence, Kansas. We have a lot of bike rides, restaurant excursions, walk. A great keynote speaker, Wes Marshall, who wrote the book Killed by a Traffic Engineer, and then followed up with Strong Towns Crash Analysis Studio workshop. And then on the afternoon of the second day, we will have a transportation alternatives funding workshop and a safe routes to school, kind of looking at more of the planning, education, software side. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. All right, Mike Goodwin, you're up next.
Okie dokie. Cherie Riffey could not be with us today because of a prior engagement, so I guess I'm her stunt double standing in. And a lot of us have been involved in the recreational trail grant program over the years. It's something that we're pretty close to as trail managers and trail builders. So we wanted to kind of walk you through the do's and don'ts and some of the details involved in that program. Unlike the TA program that Jenny was talking about, this is strictly recreational applications. It's still federal highway money coming in that actually funds this program, administered by Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. Cherie Riffey is the key person if you have specific questions, and she's more than happy typically to guide you through the process. I think the last slide in this series is contact information for Cherie. And I might say, we can always help you from a user's perspective. Kansas Trails Inc., many of us have been involved on the grant recipient side of this for many years, and we can probably help you through the process as well. It can be motorized or non-motorized, by the way. So keep that in mind. There is an allocation when you have all of the funds, which typically I think runs between $1.5 to $2 million a year. It's categorized in percentages, and so there's a certain allocation among that money to go to motorized trails versus non-motorized, as well as education, pamphlets and brochures and information and things of that sort. So Brittany, maybe the next slide. Who can actually participate? It's virtually any kind of governmental agency, including school districts, tribal governments, etc. But it also includes nonprofit organizations. So if you are a 501c3, you can apply and proceed through the application process for one of these grants. I might say if you're not a 501c3, but you're a local running, biking, nonprofit group of volunteers, you can always team up with your local city or community foundation or someone who could be a fiscal sponsor for you. And still, as Jenny was talking about some of the partnerships, you can do all the work if they will be your fiscal sponsor and sort of jump through all of the red tape involved in the contracting process, et cetera. So, Brittany, next one. Basically, any kind of recreational project is permitted. The obvious thing would be just standard trails, whether they're paved or otherwise, natural surface included. Some facilities adjacent to the trail, if it's related to the trail, but things that are off the trail that are not directly related to the trail would not be permitted. So you have lots of different sort of amenities that you could apply for funding for. You can actually acquire land, although it's a bit more complicated. You have to sort of have all those ducks in a row with a particular landowner in order to apply for the grant and be sure that it's something that could happen if you were to receive the funding from the Rec Trail Grant Program. Educational programs, I mentioned, this can be merely signage or brochures, anything to let the public know more about trails and how to safely use trails. Administrative costs, and I might say you can also purchase or you can lease or rent trail equipment that you might need to use. It must comply, of course, with the Buy America program. So you have to basically have a certificate that applies to what you're purchasing to prove to Wildlife and Parks that the materials, the equipment that you're purchasing has been, in fact, made in America. There are some tiny exceptions for ancillary costs, but for the most part, it has to be made here in the U.S. So, Brittany, next slide. So the way this works, so if you have a project that you're going to spend X dollars, you can actually be reimbursed for 80% of those costs that you expend. And that could be direct labor costs. You can hire someone to run a skid steer. You can hire someone to be the manual labor. It includes materials like gravel, for example, or concrete if you're going to do a paved trail. Rental of equipment or purchase of equipment, trail-related equipment, professional services, including design. As I mentioned earlier, land acquisition potentially. The way this works is you can spend the money. You have to spend the money up front. That's one thing to sort of be pondering. But you can match that with 20% in-kind sort of contributions of labor, materials, equipment. You can also use cash, of course, for that 20% match. And one thing to note here is a lot of the grants, including rec trail grants, can sort of be stacked or coordinated with other grant funding. And so if you were able to go to Kelli and obtain funding from Sunflower Foundation, for example, some of that funding, again, if the timing is all worked out, can be used for the 20% match on the recreational trail grant. So keep in mind, you can sort of combine these things if you need to in order to meet the obligations of the grant funding. Each grant source will have its own sort of rules. This one works on an 80-20 basis. Some of them work on a 50-50 basis. But it's good to know that you can sometimes combine them to accomplish the actual project funding. So let's see, Kelli or Brittany. Next one. Yeah, so natural surface trails, just plain old dirt, dirt rocks and natural ground qualify. Paved trails, whether it's gravel or asphalt, concrete, whatever it might be. Multi-use trails, this is often one of the really positive elements in a decision by Wildlife and Parks, whether it accommodates more than one user. Hiking and equestrian go well together, biking, cycling go well together. So all of these things can be combined sometimes to expand the user base of that trail. Things you don't see everywhere, but are popping up more and more would be things like pump tracks for bicycles, aquatic trails for kayaking, canoeing, etc. City park trails are always fun to help enhance the city park itself. And again, motorized trails, this includes virtually any kind of motorized vehicles for off-road use. So Can Rocks is maybe the prime example we have in Kansas where this has really taken off, and they have used the grant funding that we're talking about, the rec trail grant funding in the past. So Kelli, let's see. Or I'm sorry, Brittany, next. Here we go. Yeah, some of the things to think about to make your project more acceptable. And that's important, by the way, because there's only a limited funding total. I think, again, $1 to $2 million typically for the rec trail grants. And so if you meet some of these criterion or things that you can think about, it helps you to be prioritized over someone else who didn't. The first of which is meeting the SCORP guidelines. That's the state Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan guidelines. And you can find those on the Wildlife and Parks website so that you can kind of look through the elements of that. And you can indicate what aspects of the SCORP guidelines your project actually adheres to or satisfies. Community connections is always a plus, as well as cost effectiveness. As Jenny was saying, if you have actually really done the homework to nail down your expected costs, that's much appreciated. If you're vague about the costs, that's not so good. But if you know what those costs are likely to be, and they're reasonable, that is a big plus in determining which projects get funded out of the limited funding. Economic development, improving access so that different kind of trail users are more accessible to that trail. Those are pluses. Developing partnerships with city council, counties, parks, nonprofits. Those are a big plus. And obviously, these are generally speaking on public land. Safe recreation, if we get people into a location where they can now safely recreate, Wildlife and Parks recognizes that that's a positive for selecting projects. And Brittany? So one thing to think about, this is not something that happens overnight, and Jenny, I think, alluded to their process. It does take a while to work your way through the recreational trail grant process and before you can actually begin spending money and creating the trail. And of course, it begins like this time of year for preparing the grant proposal that you might make. November 15 is typically the grant application due date. There's been some flexibility since COVID, but I think it's pretty much firmly in November these days. Once your grant application has been submitted to Wildlife and Parks, let's say they get 10 or 15 proposals, Wildlife and Parks then undertakes to go look at each of those proposals on site typically and visit with you and meet with all of your volunteers or stakeholders. Take a look at the site. Is it really feasible? Does it make sense? Is it recreation oriented as opposed to transportation alternative? So this takes a few months to go through that process. Cherie typically tries to get to every site if it's feasible with everyone's schedule. And then along in the early spring, I said March in this diagram, but it does flex a little bit. So sometime in March, typically, there's a public meeting on Zoom. And again, Cherie lets everyone know the links for this and the dates for it. To let each person who's basically made a recommendation or a grant application to present the application and to explain it to the advisory board. And so the advisory board takes all of that information in, and at some point we evaluate each of the projects and advise Cherie and Wildlife and Parks as to which ones we think have more merit than the other. Again, competing for limited funds. Wildlife and Parks then looks at all of that information, and in late spring, typically May or June, they will decide that the 6 or 8 or 10 of those 12 projects can be funded this cycle. So it's really important to know, once they've made that decision, they will notify each grant applicant and say, we have agreed to fund your project. However, don't spend any money yet. So they have a process that they must go through to actually enter into a contract with your group or with the town or city to undertake the project and secure the grant funds. Only when that contract has been signed, fully executed by both you, the organization, and Wildlife and Parks, can you begin to spend money that you would be reimbursed for. And one thing that's sometimes missed, I think, in this process, not only can you not begin spending money to be reimbursed for that money, you can't have any matching funds or matching contributions that would count until that date as well. So let's say you have someone who's going to loan a skid steer to the project, which has a certain value and could be part of the 20% match. You can't actually have that volunteer work done until you have a signed contract to do the whole project with Wildlife and Parks. If you want to get reimbursed and count that 20%, it also has to start only on the date, after the date that you have entered into a contract with Wildlife and Parks. And I will say Wildlife and Parks is very flexible about all of this and will work with you throughout the process on the matching side of things. And again, you can use cash if you have the cash. If you don't, you can use volunteer hours, volunteer equipment, volunteer materials. So they really do work with each applicant to make sure the project actually goes smoothly. And you usually have a couple of years, if that's necessary, to complete the process once the contract has been entered into. So let's see, Brittany, one more. Yeah, here's Cherie's contact information. Also, if you have questions that we could help with from the other side of the grant proposal process, info at kstrails.org. Many of our team has been through the process or has been involved in the process, and we can often answer questions if you can't get a hold of Cherie. She's very helpful and always willing to help people out in making this work. So, Brittany, I think that's all I have for the moment.
Thank you, Mike. Next up, we've got Trisha Purdon with the Office of Rural Prosperity.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I am really excited to talk about some of our programs. What I really want to make sure I highlight are some of our unconventional ways to use funding to not only build upon ones that we just heard about, but add amenities, add and expand, improve those trails that you might have or you might be looking at in your community. The first one I wanted to talk about is one that Brittany is very familiar with because she was our rural champion in the very first round of this program. The thought is with Rural Champions is that we will pay someone for a full year, part-time, to tackle a project that the community's identified is a priority. In Brittany's case, and then actually in Harrington's case, they selected or worked on the concept of trails. So the Rural Champions program will fund up to $20,800 towards a salary for an individual that is paid for by the community, and then we reimburse them. It's only a 25% match. And then about halfway through that year, they will identify a specific strategy of how they want to make a solution to the problem that they've identified. And we will provide at least a $25,000 grant that then can be used to leverage any other funding. So you could use this grant to go after a larger trail grant with KDOT, or you could go after a larger trail grant with Kansas Wildlife and Parks. Use the $25,000 to meet that match for those programs, however you need to use it. But then throughout that year, we support that rural champion by providing in-depth training, mentorships. We pair them up with different resource providers, different communities that have done this and done this well, and really surround that champion with every bit of knowledge that our office can pull together to help them tackle this rural challenge. We saw, and I'll talk about in the next slide, Brittany, you did two different major trails and worked really hard on growing this, the trail initiatives in Independence, and created the Verdigris Vista Trail and the Indy Trails Network. And again, she did this in partnership with other organizations throughout the community. And that's something that we really always encourage. So if you're applying for the Rural Champion program, we want to know that your community's identified that this is a challenge, that more than one person has identified that this is a challenge in your community, and multiple organizations are willing to kind of chime in, help out, and partner together to make this project happen. And then the idea is that it's also a tangible project, right? That can be solved. So in the case of Independence, they were able to put in 2 new trails in partnership with others and other grant funds that they were able to leverage. And then I know Brittany is still working on projects across the community. The other project on the next slide is in Harrington. So Harrington has decided that as the new end of the Flint Hills Trail, they need to be ready for the new transportation traffic, the tourism traffic, the shopping traffic, all the fun things that are going to happen with the trail that's going to be ending right there in Harrington for the time being anyway. So they are actually making a trail ready community, a trail ready downtown. So they have they're using their funding to help with streetscapes. They're helping making sure there's a connector from their downtown to where the Flint Hills Trail is going to be ending. They're helping small businesses open, make sure that those businesses are catering to the folks that will be traveling on the trail. So these might be ways that you wouldn't think of when you're thinking about trail funding, but all of this really has to work together to make sure that you truly get the economic impact that the trails can have in these communities. So Harrington's really thinking ahead of the game before the trail even is fully finished to Harrington, making sure that they've got all these amenities in place, and so that more people take that trip, stay overnight, ideally there in their downtown, go shopping, dine, do some fun stuff, and then get back on the trail and head back towards Osawatomie. So just kind of a cool idea for a World Champion project. The other program I want to talk about is our SEED grant. So this comes from TEFI, which is a technology-enabled federal fiduciary. I can't remember what the I stands for, but basically it's a fee fund that is generated from banking transactions in Kansas. And this fund helps support basically placemaking projects across our state, but it also helps fund grocery stores, senior centers, libraries, childcare facilities. But when I talk about placemaking, trails definitely is included in that. We've had several communities actually use this funding to build new trails, to build little small trails, to build walking paths around parks, whatever makes sense for them to be able to do new recreation opportunities in their community. So this one's also $25,000. The match is only 10%. You do have to be a town of 5,000 population or less, and located in one of the counties that's basically 15,000 population or less counties across our state. There's a couple ones that are a little different than that are included in this grant, like Montgomery County is a little bit higher, larger county that the legislature included in there. But for the most part, you have to be fairly small county and a small town in a small county. Another cool thing that I will say, you can leverage this funding again to get other funding. You can stack this $25,000 with a wildlife and parks grant or with a KDOT grant. You can leverage this funding with champions, for example. So all of our programs that we have at the Office of Rural Prosperity are state funds. And so they can be leveraged with each other to grow the projects. And in fact, we strongly encourage it. So as normally we would be, you would say that you can only get one ORP grant a year, but if you're a champion, we want to make sure your project's successful. So you can go after SEED, you can go after HEAL, you can go after all of our other programs and really leverage our state dollars to make a big impact in your community. That's one thing that we've really encouraged across our programs. So one of the cool things that we've seen happen is our new trails being built, but different ways to do this that we've seen. In this example, we have a story walk trail. So it was actually a library project that got funded, and the library has interchangeable storybooks along a trail to encourage more youth to use the trails and be more active in the community. But they also read a book as they're going along the trail. So it's a really cool interactive way to incorporate trails in a community that you maybe hadn't thought of. We've also seen playgrounds, adding walking paths, adding benches and signage, workout centers along your trails. All of those little amenities that you maybe hadn't thought of or aren't funded by federal funding, for example, like lighting or benches or water bottle filling stations or bike repair stations. All those things are eligible under SEED, and so you can include those in their program. It's extremely flexible funding. We encourage you to be innovative and really think outside the box when you're working on these. Go ahead. I also want to make sure that you're aware that we have staff that will go to these communities and walk you through all of our programs, not just the programs that are run by the Office of Rural Prosperity. We call them grassroots strategy developers, GSDs. It actually means get stuff done. But they are meant to help you build bridges to prosperity and get those projects done that maybe you don't really have the capacity or you don't know where to start. So let's say you've heard from our speakers today and you're like, okay, we're going to go after a KDOT grant. We're going to go after a wildlife and parks grant. we're going to go after a C grant. But how do we put all this together? Our GSDs will come to your community, walk you through these programs, and help you build that funding stack as you're putting these proposals together. And I just want to say that the other piece that I should highlight, specifically for programs in my office, in the Office of Rural Prosperity, these grants shouldn't be intimidating and they shouldn't be stressful. And so if you are getting stressed out about any of our programs, pick up the phone and call one of our GSDs. Our grants are really meant to be conversation style. So tell us the story and tell us why this is needed in your community. What's your funding gap and what are you looking for? And you're more likely to be successful in any of our grant programs by providing a narrative that's very conversation style where you're telling us that story than if you're super like if you're working on a big federal grant. That is not us. So it's just us folks at the Office of Rural Prosperity reading these grants, and we want to make sure that the whole community is involved. Go ahead. There's a couple other programs I want to highlight at Commerce that you should be aware of that you could use. The first one is the tax credit programs. Community service tax credits is a great program that you can use to leverage donor funds in your community. I think you can go ahead and go forward, Brittany. The community service tax credit program can allow private nonprofit organizations, even healthcare entities, to improve their ability to undertake significant capital campaigns for community improvement projects. So for example, we had a hospital in Western Kansas that wanted to make sure they added a walking trail that surrounded their hospital complex to make sure that their employees could get some outside airtime and recreation while they're on their shift, but still be on campus. That was a project that was funded through CSP. So there's some really cool ways that you can leverage our programs at Commerce without having to go through, a massive federal grant application that can help you build upon these programs and leverage additional funding. Another grant program that I wanted to make sure I mentioned, well, let me go through this first. Where you can find all these grant programs that I talked about is on our grants page. So if you go to kansascommerce.gov/grants, you can find this page here. It's a really cool tool that you can use to find every single grant that Commerce offers. It'll tell you when the applications are open. It'll take you to all the pages where you can find all the documents. One cool thing that Commerce has done this year, because of the work that our office has done, is making sure that every single grant program has a sample application, our frequently asked questions, all the documents that you need to apply for that grant, and those are on those websites year round. So if you're planning on applying for any of our programs, you can go onto the website now. So Seed is open right now. Heal is open right now. Rural Champions is going to open on November 1st. And I'll drop the links to these programs in the chat. But the other program that I didn't specifically call out as that you can find on here is CDBG. I know that it was mentioned earlier. One thing that people often get confused about is our new category titles are called small facilities or large facilities. Think of facilities not as a building, but you could think about it as trails. So you can go after a very large grant with our community facilities grant to do a large trail system. Especially, we love regional projects. So a regional trail system is fantastic. You could do a small grant if it's just a local trail. But the CDBG program is a really useful program that you can use. It is federal funding, so we would recommend that you utilize some partners to help you apply for these programs, because those can be a little intimidating if you're a small organization that doesn't really know how to get started. But if you use your regional planning commissions, we have awesome economic development districts that will help you apply for these. And there's a list of grant writers that's actually on this page as well that you can see here in front of you. And it's listed also on the CDBG website. Go ahead and go forward. So this is the grants at a glance calendar. This is updated continually. So if you received one of our awesome grants guides, which is on that website that I just showed you, you can also go to the grants at a glance calendar. So if any deadlines have changed, any contact information has changed, this is where you'll find all of that. But you can literally calendar out every single grant program that you want to go after from Commerce and put it on your calendar so you know when all those deadlines are and you can know those well in advance. Then you can get your volunteers together, whoever's going to help you put these grants together. So you're not doing this on your own. We already kind of mentioned that one, but the last thing I don't know if anyone's really talked about is the Kansas Infrastructure Hub. This is an awesome group of folks that will help you go after all of these grants that we've all talked about today. You can go to this website, go to their LinkedIn. They offer technical assistance, but one of the cool things that they offer is also matching dollars. So we know that especially our small towns might not have the matching dollars to go after some of these grant programs, but the Infrastructure Hub can help you go after those big federal grants, and they have a pot of funding that you can apply for to use as your local match. So if you're interested in that and you're going to after some of these larger federal programs, this is a really good tool to make sure you're aware of. They have regular webinars, regular trainings. Their application is outstanding and really walks through every single federal grant program you can apply for. So it's a really good site to pay attention to and to bookmark, so that you're aware of what other programs might come up. I think that's all I had. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Trisha. Such great information. And last but certainly not least, let's hear from Kelli Mark from the Sunflower Foundation and all the amazing things that they've got going on in Sunflower.
Thanks, Brittany. Hi, everyone. Man, we've gotten some really great information so far. I am humbled to be in such amazing company on this call today. So thanks, everyone. And I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly. So hopefully we have a little bit of time for questions at the end. But I want to give you guys a preview today of Sunflower's new trail funding that should be released in early January of 2026. But just a little bit of history first. So this is Sunflower's 20th anniversary of funding trails. We've been funding trails for 20 years. We're really proud of that. And since 2005, we've funded over 200 trail projects in the state. And we started this trail funding, the Sunflower Trails program, as an innovative way to fight obesity. Back in 2005, CDC was all about, we have an obesity epidemic, we need ways to fight it. And Sunflower was like, well, let's think about innovative ways we can do that. If we're asking people to move their bodies, we should really give them a safe, accessible place in which to do that. So that's kind of where our roots and trails are. But over these past 20 years, we've come to realize, as I know all of you in this room know, all of these other benefits of trails that you can see listed on your slide here. And we look at all those different benefits that access to public trails give us. We know that it's really one of our most impactful ways to make real change in communities, especially our small rural communities. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Brittany. So we've learned a lot over the last 20 years of funding trails. We have listened to our trail communities. We have visited trail communities. We've been in the trenches with you guys. And as we started to think about what's our trail funding going to look like next year? How are we going to move forward? We have been doing these talking trails with Sunflower, virtual listening tours, really trying to get in the hearts and minds of our trail communities and our trail champions across the state, and trying to design a trail investment that is going to be what you guys need. And so we have come up with a little bit new idea. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Brittany. So traditionally, we have funded kind of in three different trail buckets. We've done trail builder grants, which is the actual building of trails. We've done trail promotion, planning, and evaluation grants. And we've done kind of these large trail system grants, which is this, these large statewide projects. So we're backing up a little bit. In thinking about this investment, we're thinking, like, what do folks need to really get to these projects? Kind of going back to what Jenny said and what Mike said and what Trisha said about how to make your application competitive. This is trying to get at some of that stuff. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to break down these categories for you. We're going to have different parts of this funding opportunity. And the first one is going to be trailblazers. So this is going to be essentially for communities that don't have a trail yet, but they really, really want one. And before you fill out that state or that federal application, before you like jump in with both feet and say, all right, we're going to tackle this trail. Have you thought about right of way? Have you talked to your landowners? Do you know who owns the land? Have you thought about how you engage your community, how you get support in your community? Trailblazers is really all about getting those pieces in place before you go after that large trail grant. So this is going to be a cohort style group. You're going to learn some of these things. You're going to have this wraparound support and technical assistance to teach you some of these fundamentals of tackling a trail project in a supportive peer environment. All right, go to the next slide. All right, so our second category that we're talking about in this funding opportunity is going to be Trail in a Box Regional Champions. So I'm not sure if all of you are aware of what Trail in a Box is, but Trail in a Box was a partnership between Sunflower Foundation and the Kansas Trails Council, Mike Goodwin, who's on this call, as well as Thrive Allen County. And this is those trailers that have everything you need to build a natural surface trail in that trailer. And then the Trail in a Box staff, Mike Goodwin or other champions, comes out to your community and teaches you how to use all that equipment. So the community brings the volunteers together. You've got someone there to walk you through how to use all of that equipment and build that natural surface trail. So what we've learned from Trail in a Box is it's really successful. People love Trail in a Box, and it really helps them make these natural surface trails in their community. And so we need more Mike Goodwins across the state, right? We need more people to be able to visit your community with the trailer and teach you how to use it. So this category is designated to do just that. In different regions of the state to help a community identify a person that will make a good Trail in a Box regional champion and to support that person throughout the year, get them trained up, teach them how to go into another community with a Trail in a Box trailer. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so Trail Stewards is going to be for communities that do have a trail, but they really want to take advantage of that trail. They really want to learn how to promote that trail, how to engage new users on their trail, how to bring folks into their community, kind of the things that Trisha talked about. So this is going to be a cohort style learning. It's going to give those communities that wraparound support, that technical assistance, that peer learning to really teach them how to make the most of the trail that they have in their community and build that trail up. We do know that trail maintenance is a real priority. We've heard that again and again from the folks that we have talked to, our trail champions. And so this category is going to allow some of the funding to be used for trail maintenance. So really take care of those trails that you have in your community as you're building up the businesses, as you're learning how to promote your trail and market it and really get community support. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so trail towns is our last category that's going to be in this opportunity. So what is a trail town? Well, a trail town it's a nationally recognized program, started on the East Coast almost 20 years ago, and it has a proven track record of really helping communities recognize and embrace their trails as a vital part of their cultural identity, their local character, and their future growth, including their economic growth. So a trail town is really about taking advantage of that trail that you have and really using it for all those other aspects of your community, economic growth, for getting your community behind you, for cultural identity, for bringing new users into your trail, for bringing new businesses into your town to cater to those trail users. So really wrapping your community identity around that trail and using it to strengthen your community. So Trail Towns is also going to work very close to Trail Stewards. It is going to be a cohort style technical assistance and wraparound support program. So you're going to the individuals, the communities in this cohort are going to go through this together. They're going to learn all the different pieces of making your community a successful trail town. And we're going to give them the opportunity to complete some benchmarks along the way. And at the end of this cohort, be able to become an officially certified Kansas Trail Town. So we're going to work closely with Kansas Trails Inc. We're going to work closely with some national trail town experts to bring you this training and technical assistance. And this is really meant to be a pilot program to see how this trail towns concept works in Kansas. We're going to test this out. We're going to see how these benchmarks work. Are they the right benchmarks? Are they easy for towns to complete? With the hope that Kansas Trails Inc. will then move forward year after year, building up this Trail Town program and give other communities a chance to complete these benchmarks and be certified trail towns. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Brittany. Oh, I am running out of time super fast.
We'll go a couple minutes longer so we can have some Q&A.
Awesome. So all of these cohorts are going to be able to go through these different training programs together. And at the end, we're to come together for a Kansas Trail Champions Exchange. This is going to be an in-person event where you're going to be able to learn from your peers. We're going to have some of our state experts at this event teaching you how best to write a Department of Commerce application, how best to write a Wildlife and Parks application. We're going to have KTI on site with us to provide some technical assistance. And those towns that were able to complete the benchmarks for the Trail Town certification, we're going to have a celebration and an award ceremony for those towns. So like I said, this RFP will go out in January. So if you haven't signed up for Sunflower's e-news on our website, sunflowerfoundation.org, please do so, and you will get notified when any RFP opens. We will be having some informational webinars early in January to talk more in detail about how to apply for this RFP, who's eligible, what the amount of funding is going to be, all of that good stuff. So keep an ear out for that, and I'll wrap up now so we can have 30 seconds of questions.
All right. Anybody have questions? I'm keeping an eye out, so if you have a question, unmute yourself and I'll call your name. No one has questions? Not even one?
They're like, it's 101, we're hungry.
I know. I can tell you, as Trisha mentioned, as a recipient of grants from both the Office of Rural Prosperity and the Sunflower Foundation, there's such great organizations to work with, and they really have your back and support you through all the things if you run into any issues. But they're huge champions and fantastic organizations that have really helped make an impact in our local community here in Independence. Myron, you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yeah. First of all, thank you everyone for the great information today. My question specifically is for Trisha, and want to know what advice Trisha you would give to a small community like Rossville, where about 1,000 people, 1,000 population, but unfortunately we're in Shawnee County, and so we don't qualify for many of the programs that Commerce offers. So what advice do you have for us going forward to take advantage of the Commerce programs?
Yeah, so Rural Champions, you'd still be eligible for. HEAL, you'd still be eligible for. I know that CDBG, probably not, and SEED, you're definitely not, but we can definitely talk through some of these programs that might work for you. A program that I didn't mention is Towns, just because we haven't released when that one's going to open again. It's likely going to open in late spring this year, just because of the way the funding cycle is going to land. But Towns would definitely fit your community. It's up to $10,000. And again, it's very, very flexible funding that would help you just make your town more welcoming, more beautiful, more attractive for visitors. So trails is definitely an eligible project, or anything that would help improve your trail systems if you do already have a network, or even a nice wide sidewalk that connects to a natural trail system. Anything like that would all be eligible expenses under towns. But I would say just reach out to our office. We're more than happy to come up and chat with you and walk through your town and see if there's other ways that we can address your needs. The cool thing about our office is that we can change our programs fairly quickly, and kind of overhaul those to make sure that we are meeting the needs of towns like yours that kind of get left out and are in that gap of communities that are eligible. So just having those conversations with us allows us to make those changes so that your community can be eligible in future rounds. So just reach out to us and let us know what's going on. But I'm happy to come to your town anytime.
Anybody else? All right, well then, as I mentioned at the kind of in the middle of Jenny's piece, I do have a two-page handout kind of summarizing everybody's what they have to offer for the funding opportunities, as well as all of their contact information and all of the links that were in their presentations today, in case you didn't have an opportunity to get that down. So you'll have all their contact information. And then, as always, if you have questions, feel free to email KTI at info@kstrails.org. Mike Goodwin is awesome with responding back to people on that, really in a timely manner. And also check out our website, because there's a ton of great information on that as well. Last thing, two more things. The Trail Talk Tuesday videos are available for replay on our website, kstrails.org/TTT. So all of the previous episodes are on there, and this will be on there in the next day or two. I realized I didn't hit the record button until a little bit through Jenny, which is why we heard the is now recording. So I'll need to go in and add a little bit of video to that prior to. And then lastly, the next Trail Talk Tuesday is next on November 11th, which is Veterans Day, and we're going to be talking about trail accessibility. So that's the next episode, and just really appreciate all the speakers and their time today for taking the opportunity to chat with all of us on this Trail Talk Tuesday, and thank you all for joining. And we'll see you on the trail next time. Email us if you have any other questions. Thank you.